The medication made everything feel like I was swimming through thick water. My eyelids were heavy. My body ached in places I didn't even know existed. And the beeping of the machines around me had become a strange lullaby over the past week. It was sometime past midnight when I opened my eyes. Not fully awake, but not quite asleep either. That's when I saw her. She was standing at the foot of my hospital bed just watching me. The dim light from the hallway cast her in shadows, but I knew that silhouette. I'd know it anywhere, even after 5 years of not seeing it. My heart started racing, and for a second I thought maybe I was dreaming. Maybe the pain medication was playing tricks on my mind. But then she moved closer and I could see her face clearly. It was really her. Lisa. My ex-girlfriend from what felt like another lifetime ago. She was smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile you'd expect from someone visiting an injured person in the hospital. It wasn't sympathetic or worried. It was almost peaceful, like she'd just figured out the answer to a question that had been bothering her for years. Like she'd already made up her mind about something important and nothing I could say would change it. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. The words came out as a whisper. "Lisa, what are you doing here?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled the visitor's chair closer to my bed and sat down, still wearing that strange, knowing smile. The rain outside was getting heavier, tapping against the window like it was trying to get our attention. "I heard about your accident," she finally said, her voice soft. "I had to come." My mind was racing, trying to make sense of this. The last time I'd seen Lisa, things hadn't ended well. We'd had that terrible fight, the kind where you both say things you can't take back. She'd wanted me to move with her to Seattle. She'd gotten an amazing job offer, a chance to teach at an art school she'd always dreamed about. But I couldn't leave. I was 2 years into my position at the law firm, finally making good money, finally proving to my parents that law school hadn't been a waste. I'd chosen my career. She'd left without me, and we'd never spoken again. "How did you even know I was here?" I asked, still trying to process that she was real and not some medication-induced hallucination. "Does it matter?" she replied, tilting her head slightly. "I'm here now." There was something different about her. 5 years had passed, but it wasn't just that she looked older. There was a calmness to her that hadn't been there before. Back when we were together, Lisa had been all fire and passion, always pushing for the next adventure, the next big thing. Now she seemed settled, like she'd found something she'd been looking for. "You look different," I said, stating the obvious because my brain wasn't working well enough for anything clever. She laughed quietly. "So do you. Though I guess being in a car accident will do that to a person." The accident. Right. 3 broken ribs, a fractured leg, internal bruising, and more stitches than I wanted to count. The other driver had run a red light and I'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. It didn't feel very lucky. "Do you remember the promise?" Lisa asked suddenly, leaning forward in her chair. I stared at her, confused. "What promise?" "The one we made. That weekend at the cabin." "You really don't remember?" My mind fumbled through old memories, trying to grab onto something concrete. The cabin. We'd gone there for a long weekend, maybe 6 months before everything fell apart. It was this tiny place her friend owned right by a lake. We'd spent 3 days with no internet, no work emails, just us. And then it hit me. The last night there, sitting by the fire, half a bottle of wine between us. We'd been talking about the future, about how scary it was to love someone because you never knew what might happen. And Lisa had said something like, "Let's make a promise. If either of us ever truly needs the other, we'll come, no matter what." No questions asked. I'd agreed, of course. It had seemed romantic at the time, the kind of thing young people in love say to each other. I'd completely forgotten about it after we broke up. "You remember now?" Lisa said, reading my face. "I can see it." "Lisa, that was just something we said. We were drinking, we were being dramatic." "Maybe you were," she said, and there was that smile again. "But I meant it." Before I could respond, the door opened and a nurse walked in, looking surprised to see a visitor at this hour. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours ended at 9, she said kindly but firmly. I looked at Lisa, but she was already standing up, gathering her coat. "Wait," I said, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it as pain shot through my ribs. "You can't just show up after 5 years and then leave." "Get some rest," Lisa said, completely ignoring the nurse who was now checking my monitors. "You need to heal. When will I see you again?" She paused at the door, looking back at me one more time. "When you're ready to understand why I came." And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the confused nurse and a mind full of questions. "Was that your wife?" the nurse asked as she adjusted my IV. "No," I said quietly. "Just someone I used to know." But that wasn't true, was it? Lisa wasn't just someone I used to know. She was the person I'd loved more than anyone. The person I'd let go because I'd been too scared to take a risk. And now she'd shown up at my hospital bed in the middle of the night, talking about promises and smiling like she knew something I didn't. After the nurse left, I lay there in the dark, listening to the rain and the beeping machines, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My leg throbbed. My ribs ached with every breath, but none of that hurt as much as the look on Lisa's face when she'd asked if I remembered our promise. The worst part? I hadn't just forgotten the promise. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be that person, the one who made promises about always being there for someone. Somewhere along the way, between the long hours at the firm and the expensive apartment and the practical life I'd built, I'd forgotten how to be anything other than careful. And Lisa's smile? That knowing, peaceful smile, it felt like she'd seen right through me, like she'd come to my bedside not to reconnect, but to confirm something she'd already suspected, that I'd become exactly the person she'd feared I would become when she'd asked me to take a chance and move to Seattle with her. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. Somewhere out there in the rainy night, Lisa was driving away from the hospital, probably heading back to whatever life she'd built without me, and I was lying here broken and confused, wondering why she'd really come. One thing I knew for certain, though, that smile wasn't about me. It was about her. She'd already made her choice about something, and I had a sinking feeling that by the time I figured out what it was, it would be too late to matter. Physical therapy was the worst part of recovery. Every morning at 9, a cheerful therapist named Tom would come in and make me move my broken body in ways that felt impossible. But it was also the only time my mind wasn't clouded by medication, which meant it was when I couldn't stop thinking about Lisa's visit. It had been 3 days since that night, and I'd started to wonder if it had actually happened. Maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing. But then I'd found a small coffee stain on the visitor's chair, right where she'd been sitting, and I knew it was real. My fiancée, Rachel, was there almost every moment she wasn't at work. She'd bring me magazines, adjust my pillows, and talk about rescheduling our wedding that we'd had to postpone because of the accident. Rachel was perfect, really. She was a financial advisor, organized and efficient. Our relationship made sense. Our families got along. We wanted the same things from life, or at least that's what I'd always told myself. But watching her plan our future from my hospital bed, something felt off. She was talking about venues and catering options, and all I could think about was Lisa standing at the foot of my bed with that mysterious smile. "You're not listening," Rachel said, looking up from her tablet. "Sorry, the pain medication makes it hard to focus." She gave me a sympathetic look and squeezed my hand. "It's okay. We have plenty of time to figure everything out. The important thing is that you're alive." Alive. Yes. But did being alive mean I was actually living? That night after Rachel went home, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back to that weekend at the cabin with Lisa. The more I thought about it, the more details came flooding back. It hadn't just been a romantic getaway. It had been a turning point, though I hadn't realized it at the time. We'd talked about everything that weekend. Lisa had told me about her dreams of opening her own art studio someday, teaching kids who couldn't afford regular art classes. She'd said she wanted a life that meant something, not just a life that looked good on paper. And I'd told her I understood, that I wanted the same things. But I'd been lying, hadn't I? Or maybe not lying exactly, but I'd been telling her what I thought I should want rather than what I actually wanted, because when it came down to it, when she'd gotten that job offer in Seattle and asked me to come with her, I'd said no. I'd chosen the safe path. The partnership track at the law firm, the stable income, the life my parents would approve of. The memory of our last fight was crystal clear now. We'd been in her apartment, half-packed boxes everywhere. She'd been crying, which Lisa almost never did. "You're choosing a job over us," she'd said. "I'm not choosing a job. I'm choosing my career, my future." What about our future? I hadn't had a good answer for that. Instead, I'd said something about long-distance relationships and how we could make it work. But we both knew I was just trying to make the ending easier. Lisa had looked at me with such disappointment that day, and then she'd said something I'd tried to forget. One day you're going to wake up and realize you've built a perfect life that makes you miserable. She'd been right, hadn't she? Here I was, engaged to a wonderful woman I didn't love the way I should, working at a job that paid well but left me empty, living in a nice apartment that felt like a hotel room. Everything looked good from the outside, but inside, I felt nothing. Over the next few weeks, as my body slowly healed, I started asking questions. I tracked down an old mutual friend, Kevin, who'd kept in touch with Lisa after we broke up. Getting his number wasn't easy, but I was a lawyer. I knew how to find people. When I finally called him, he was surprised to hear from me. "It's been, 5 years?" Kevin said. "About that. Listen, I know this is going to sound strange, but Lisa visited me in the hospital. I just wanted to know how she's doing." There was a long pause on the other end. "She came to see you? That's interesting." "Why is it interesting?" "Because Lisa doesn't really look back, you know? After you two split, she moved to Seattle, started teaching at that art school. Last I heard, she's living in some small coastal town now, running art programs for kids. She seems happy. Happy. Without me. Living the life she'd always talked about." "Did she ever get married?" I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. "No, she dated here and there, but nothing serious. I always got the feeling she was protecting herself, you know? Like she didn't want to get hurt again." After I hung up with Kevin, I sat there in my hospital bed feeling like the worst person in the world. Lisa had gone on to live authentically, to pursue her dreams even though it meant doing it alone. And what had I done? I'd played it safe. I'd climbed the ladder at a job I didn't care about. I'd gotten engaged to someone because it made sense, not because I couldn't imagine my life without her. Rachel came by that evening with dinner from my favorite restaurant. She was talking about work, about how one of her clients had made a smart investment. She was so enthusiastic about it, so genuinely excited about portfolio diversification, and all I could think was, when was the last time I was genuinely excited about anything? "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, noticing my silence. "Yeah, just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was having what you might call a crisis. The accident had broken my body, but Lisa's visit had broken something else. It had shattered this illusion I'd been living under, this idea that I'd made the right choices. That night, after Rachel left, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I Googled Lisa, found her social media, though she didn't post much. But what was there painted a picture of someone at peace. Photos of her students' artwork. Pictures of her at the beach with a dog. A small house with a garden. Nothing flashy or impressive. Just real life, lived intentionally. I looked around. My hospital room at the expensive flowers Rachel had sent. The leather briefcase from my law firm sitting in the corner. The engagement ring on Rachel's finger that had cost 3 months of my salary. Everything looked so impressive. Everything felt so empty. And I finally understood Lisa's smile that night. She hadn't come to get me back. She hadn't come to see if we could try again. She'd come to see if I'd found what I was looking for when I'd chosen my career over her. And in that hospital room, broken and medicated, she'd gotten her answer. I was successful. I was on track. I was engaged to a great woman. But I wasn't happy. And she could see it in my eyes, the same way I could now see it when I looked in the mirror. She'd made her choice 5 years ago to live authentically, even if it meant doing it alone. And I'd made mine to live safely, even if it meant losing myself in the process. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? Getting out of the hospital felt like being released from prison, except I was trading one cage for another. My apartment, with its modern furniture and carefully chosen color scheme, felt like a museum. Everything was in its place. Nothing was lived in. Rachel had cleaned before I came home, so it smelled like lemon polish and artificial lavender. "Welcome home," she said, helping me through the door with my crutches. "I made sure everything was ready for you." She'd set up the guest room on the first floor so I wouldn't have to deal with stairs. She'd filled the fridge with healthy meals in containers. She'd even created a medication schedule on the kitchen whiteboard. It was thoughtful. It was organized. It was everything Rachel was, and it made me want to scream. But I didn't scream. I thanked her, kissed her on the cheek, and settled into the guest room that felt like a recovery ward. Over the next few days, Rachel went back to work, and I was alone with my thoughts. That was dangerous. I couldn't stop thinking about Lisa, about her visit, about that smile, about the life she was living while I was stuck in this perfectly designed cage of my own making. On day 5 of being home, I did something I knew I shouldn't do. I found Lisa's phone number through Kevin. It took me 2 hours to work up the courage to call. My hand was shaking when I finally pressed the button. It rang 3 times and I almost hung up. "Hello?" Her voice hit me like a wave. All those memories came rushing back. "Lisa, it's me. It's Daniel." Silence. Then, "I wondered when you'd call." "You knew I would?" "I hoped you would," she said, and I could hear something in her voice. Not quite sadness, not quite hope. Something in between. "How are you feeling?" "Better, physically anyway." "Lisa, why did you really come to see me?" Another pause. I could hear wind in the background like she was outside somewhere. "Can we meet?" she asked. "I think this conversation needs to happen in person." My heart jumped. "Yes, where are you?" "Still in town, actually. I'm staying at that little hotel near the park. The one with the blue door." I knew the place. It was small, quirky, nothing like the chain hotels Rachel and I stayed at when we traveled for work. "I can be there in an hour. I'll be waiting." I should have told Rachel where I was going. I should have been honest. Instead, I left her a text saying I needed to pick up some things from the office. Another lie. Another safe choice that felt wrong. The drive to the hotel felt eternal. My leg was still in a brace, making me clumsy, but I managed. Lisa was sitting in the small garden behind the hotel when I found her. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked more beautiful than I remembered. "You came," she said, standing up. "You asked me to." We sat down on a bench, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was heavy with 5 years of unsaid things. "I need to tell you something," Lisa finally said, looking at her hands. "And I need you to just listen, okay? Don't interrupt. Don't try to fix anything. Just listen." I nodded. 5 years ago, after we broke up, after I moved to Seattle, I found out I was pregnant. The world stopped. Everything stopped. My heart, my breathing, everything. "I know," she continued, her voice steady but quiet. "I know that's not what you expected to hear." I found out about 2 weeks after I got to Seattle. I was terrified. Alone in a new city, starting a new job, and pregnant with your baby. I wanted to say something, anything, but she held up her hand. I spent days trying to decide if I should tell you. Part of me wanted to. Part of me thought maybe you'd come to Seattle if you knew, but I realized that wasn't fair. You'd made your choice. You'd chosen your career, your safe life, and I didn't want you to be with me because you felt obligated. I didn't want our child to grow up with a father who resented being forced into a life he didn't choose. Tears were running down her face now, but her voice stayed strong. So I decided to do it alone. I found a small apartment. I told my family. I started planning for this whole new future, and then, at 3 months, I lost the baby. My own tears were falling now. I reached for her hand and she let me take it. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," she said, squeezing my hand. "These things happen. The doctor said it was common. But losing that baby, going through that alone, it changed me. It made me realize that life is too short to live for other people's expectations. Too short to play it safe. Why didn't you tell me? Even after? What would have been the point? You'd made your choice. I'd made mine. Telling you would only have hurt us both more. But I never forgot about you. I never stopped wondering if you'd found what you were looking for. And that's why you came to the hospital?" She nodded. "When I heard about your accident, something in me just needed to see you. I needed to know if you were happy with the life you'd chosen. I needed to see if letting you go had been the right choice." "And?" She looked at me with those eyes I'd fallen in love with so many years ago, and I got my answer when I saw you in that hospital bed. You looked successful. You looked well cared for, but you didn't look happy. And I realized that my choice to let you go, to not tell you about the baby, to build my own life on my own terms, it was the right choice. Not because it didn't hurt. It hurt terribly, but because it let me become the person I was meant to be. We sat there in that little garden holding hands, crying together for what we'd lost and what might have been. But here's the thing I realized in that moment. Lisa wasn't crying because she wanted me back. She was crying because she was saying goodbye to the last piece of her past that she'd been holding on to. That smile, I said, understanding it now. That night in the hospital, you were smiling because you'd already made your peace with everything. Yes, she said simply. I came to see you one last time, and when I saw you, I knew I'd done the right thing. As hard as it was, as much as it hurt, I'd chosen to live authentically, and you'd chosen to live safely. Neither choice is wrong, Daniel. They're just different. But what if my choice was wrong? I asked, my voice breaking. What if I chose wrong? She turned to face me fully, and there was so much compassion in her eyes. Then you have to decide what you're going to do about it. But you can't do it for me. You can't try to go back and fix what happened between us. That door's closed, Daniel. What happened with us, with the baby, with all of it. That's in the past. But your future? That's still yours to choose. The conversation with Lisa changed everything. I drove home from that hotel in a daze, my mind trying to process what she'd told me. A baby. She'd been pregnant with our child. She'd lost that child. She'd gone through all of that alone because I'd chosen a law firm partnership over a life with her. When I got home, Rachel was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up with a smile when I came in. Hey, how was the office? I stood there with my crutches, staring at this woman I was supposed to marry, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep lying. I didn't go to the office, I said. Her smile faded. Where did you go? To see Lisa, my ex-girlfriend. She's the one who visited me in the hospital that night. Rachel put down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. Her face went carefully blank, the way it did when she was processing bad news about a client's portfolio. Okay, she said slowly. Why, so I told her. Not everything. Because Lisa's story about the baby wasn't mine to share. But I told her about the promise we'd made, about how seeing Lisa again had made me realize I wasn't happy, about how I'd been going through the motions of life instead of actually living it. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she walked over to the couch and sat down heavily. How long have you felt this way? She asked. I don't know. Maybe always? Maybe just since the accident? I honestly don't know anymore. Do you love her? Lisa? I thought about that question carefully. I don't think so. Not in the way you mean. But seeing her made me realize I don't love myself. I don't love the person I've become. Rachel looked down at her engagement ring, twisting it on her finger. You know what's funny? I knew something was off. I've known for months, maybe longer. But I kept telling myself it was just work stress or wedding planning stress or that all couples go through phases. I kept making excuses because I didn't want to admit that maybe we were just going through the motions. Rachel, I'm sorry. She held up her hand. Don't apologize. You're being honest with me, which is more than a lot of people would do. But I need you to be honest about something else. Are you marrying me because you love me? Or because I'm the sensible choice? Because I check all the right boxes? The question hung in the air between us. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her that I loved her desperately, that she was everything I needed. But I'd done enough lying to her and to myself. I don't know, I whispered. I thought I loved you. I wanted to love you. You're amazing, Rachel. You're smart and kind, and you deserve someone who's absolutely certain about you. But you're not certain. No, I'm not. She took off her ring and set it on the coffee table between us. She wasn't crying, which somehow made it worse. She just looked sad and tired. I think you should stay somewhere else for a while, she said quietly. You need to figure out what you want from life. And I need to figure out if I want to be with someone who has to convince himself to love me. I moved out that night, checking into a hotel with the few things I could grab quickly. I should have felt terrible. I should have felt like a failure. And I did, but I also felt something else. Relief. Like I'd finally stopped pretending. The next few weeks were brutal. I tried to go back to work, but my heart wasn't in it. My boss called me into his office one day looking concerned. Daniel, your billable hours have dropped significantly. Is everything okay? I was in a serious car accident. I understand that, but you've been cleared to work. We need to know you're committed to making partner next year. I looked at him, at his expensive suit and his corner office with the view, and I realized I didn't care. I didn't care about making partner. I didn't care about billable hours. I didn't care about any of it. I need to take a leave of absence, I heard myself say. He looked shocked. A leave of absence? Daniel, this is a critical time in your career. I know. I need it anyway. I walked out of his office feeling lighter than I had in years. My parents were less understanding when I told them about Rachel and the job. You're throwing away everything you've worked for, my dad said over the phone. For what? Some midlife crisis? I'm 34, Dad. It's not a midlife crisis. It's just a crisis. This isn't funny, Daniel. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to be honest. I've been living the life you wanted me to live, and it's making me miserable. We never forced you to do anything. But that wasn't entirely true, was it? They'd never forced me exactly, but they'd made their expectations very clear. Law school instead of art school. Corporate law instead of public interest work. A practical partner instead of a passionate relationship. They'd laid out a path, and I'd followed it because it was easier than forging my own. That conversation with my dad ended badly, with both of us angry. But later that night he called me back. Your mother is mad at me for calling you back, he said. But I need to tell you something. When I was your age, I had a chance to open my own business, something I really cared about. But I was too scared. I chose the safe job with the steady paycheck, and I've regretted it every day since. Dad, I had no idea. How would you? I never talked about it. I just pushed you to be successful, to be secure, because that's what I thought mattered. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe security isn't worth it if you're miserable. It was the most honest conversation I'd ever had with my father. I spent my leave of absence in therapy, working through everything that had happened. My therapist, an older woman named Dr. Chen, didn't pull any punches. You've spent your entire adult life trying to meet other people's expectations, she told me. Your parents, your bosses, even Rachel. You've never stopped to ask yourself what you actually want. I don't know what I want. Then that's what we need to figure out. It took months of hard work, of crying in therapy sessions, of journaling and thinking and trying to untangle all the choices I'd made from the choices I'd been pressured into making. Slowly, something started to become clear. I didn't want to go back to corporate law. I didn't want to marry Rachel, as wonderful as she was. I didn't want the big apartment or the fancy car or any of the things I'd thought defined success. What I wanted was to do work that mattered, to help people who actually needed help, to live in a place that felt like home instead of a showroom, to maybe eventually find someone I loved so much that choosing them wouldn't feel like a sacrifice. I wanted to be the person I'd promised Lisa I was during that weekend at the cabin. The person who cared more about meaning than money. The person who wasn't afraid to take risks. The question was, could I become that person after spending so many years being someone else? 6 months after the accident, spring arrived and I barely recognized my life. I'd officially resigned from the law firm, much to everyone's shock. I'd sold my expensive apartment and most of my furniture. I'd said goodbye to Rachel one last time, a meeting that was sad but also peaceful. She'd started dating someone new, another financial advisor who looked at her the way I never had. She deserved that. I'd taken a job with a legal aid clinic in a smaller city about 2 hours away. The pay was a fraction of what I'd been making, but the work actually meant something. I helped people who were facing eviction, who'd been wronged by their employers, who needed someone in their corner but couldn't afford a fancy lawyer. For the first time in years, I'd wake up actually wanting to go to work. I'd also started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I wasn't any good, but that wasn't the point. The point was doing something just because it brought me joy. Lisa and I had stayed in touch, messaging every few weeks. Nothing deep, just checking in. She'd tell me about her students. I'd tell her about my cases. It was comfortable, friendly. The door to our romantic past was closed, just like she'd said. But we'd found a different kind of connection. Then one random Tuesday, I got a call from Kevin. Have you talked to Lisa recently? He asked, sounding worried. Not in a couple weeks. Why? She had a biking accident. She's in the hospital in Pacific Grove. It's not life-threatening, but she broke her collarbone and has a concussion. She's pretty banged up. My heart stopped. Is she okay? Does she need anything? I thought you'd want to know. I looked at my calendar. I had 3 client meetings scheduled for the rest of the week. Important meetings. People were counting on me. But Lisa had come to see me when I was in the hospital. Even after everything, even after I'd chosen my career over her, even after all the pain, she'd shown up. I called my boss at the legal aid clinic. I need a few days off. It's an emergency. Is everything okay? It will be. I drove to Pacific Grove that afternoon, the coastal town where Lisa lived. It was beautiful, the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else. I found the small hospital easily, asked for her room number, and made my way through the halls. It was late evening when I got there, past visiting hours, but I explained I'd driven 2 hours and the nurse let me go up. Lisa's room was at the end of a quiet corridor. The door was half open and I could see her sleeping in the bed, her arm in a sling, a bandage on her head. I stood there at her bedside, just watching her breathe, and I understood everything. I understood why she'd come to see me that night 6 months ago. I understood what it meant to care about someone enough to show up, even when it was complicated, even when it hurt. But I also understood something else. I wasn't here to win her back. I wasn't here because